What if the pressure you feel every day did not come from who you are, but from a part you were trying to play? From the moment you wake up, there is a quiet sense that you should already know how to be this person called you. How to think, how to feel, how to respond correctly to the world. But pause for a moment. Who decided that this role existed at all? You move through life as if an invisible script is running in the background, measuring every word, every hesitation, every success and failure. You try to perform it well, even when you are not sure who wrote it. And when you feel tired, anxious, or strangely disconnected, you assume something is wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong? What if the strain comes from carrying an assignment that was never given in the first place? From the moment we are born, the world begins to whisper suggestions into the soft, pliable clay of our minds. Before we can speak, before we can fully understand, the shapes of expectation settle quietly around us. A smile is praised, a cry is hushed, a question is answered with, because that's how it is. Slowly, imperceptibly, we start to absorb the roles that others perform around us, like an echo bouncing off invisible walls. We are told what it means to be a child, a student, a friend. We see the patterns of behavior, the gestures, the habitual reactions, and we imitate them. At first, it feels like learning. It is, in truth, copying. Copying without consent. Copying before the mind has learned to distinguish between observation and identity. Neuroscientists call this early patterning the mirror neuron effect, where our brains fire in response to the actions of others, embedding their behavior into our own. From the outside, it looks like learning. From the inside, it feels like discovering who we are. But we are discovering a mask, not a self. By the time language enters our lives, by the time we can articulate a me and a you, much of the role is already built. Social norms, cultural expectations, subtle cues from parents, siblings, teachers, and peers, they combine into a scaffold we are expected to inhabit effortlessly. Think of it as a theater stage erected around a sleeping actor. The lights are bright, the audience invisible, and the lines are written before the actor ever opens their eyes. Some of these instructions are explicit. Be polite, work hard, speak up. Others are implicit. A look that freezes a thought, a tone that validates certain emotions and ignores others. These tiny nudges, repeated endlessly, create a deep sense of normal that feels as though it naturally arises from within, when it is actually a reflection of countless external voices. Psychologists call this process internalized scripts, and they are powerful because they masquerade as authenticity. Even our bodies are complicit. From posture to gestures, from the way we walk to the way we tilt our heads in conversation, countless movements are learned before they can be consciously chosen. A growing theory in developmental neuroscience suggests that by age 6, the majority of social and emotional scripts are firmly encoded. By the time we reach adolescence, we rarely notice that we are performing a role. We simply assume it is us. And here is the paradox. The more the script is repeated, the more it becomes invisible. Effortlessly, we adopt a persona that seems personal, unique, even essential. Yet, if we trace it backward, there is no evidence that we chose it. It is not built from the raw material of our curiosity, our joy, or our instinct. It is a complex machinery of adaptation, assembled silently, largely unconsciously, by forces outside our control. Culturally, we reinforce this further. Stories tell us that identity is earned, that character is cultivated, that effort is the path to selfhood. While there is truth in growth and learning, there is also a quiet trap, effort directed toward maintaining a script that never belonged to us. We do not often notice this because society has invested in the illusion. The roles feel inevitable, the lines feel necessary, the audience feels real. Yet, in the deepest corners of experience, a faint tension remains. A whisper of "something is not mine" percolates beneath the surface. This tension is subtle, perhaps a moment of doubt in adolescence, a fleeting sense of misalignment in early adulthood, or a quiet, unnameable disquiet in the middle of everyday life. Many of us push it aside, labeling it stress, anxiety, or dissatisfaction. Some philosophers, from existentialists to contemporary thinkers, have observed that the sense of unease often stems from living in borrowed scripts. Ultimately, The origin of our roles is neither sinister nor negligent. There is no villain. There is no grand conspiracy. There is only the adaptive miracle of human development, a species wired to survive, to imitate, to belong, to reflect the world in which it emerges. And yet, the consequence is subtle but profound. We spend decades performing a role that was never truly assigned to us, believing every word, every thought, every habit is proof of our essential self. It is only later, sometimes decades later, that the first cracks appear. And when they do, they invite a question that can feel both terrifying and liberating. What if the person I think I am is just a performance? The first moment of discovery rarely arrives with fanfare. It is quiet, almost imperceptible. Perhaps it comes in a pause between actions, when the rhythm of your day falls away and you notice something unusual, that you are moving, speaking, reacting, but not quite from yourself. There is a subtle dissonance, a faint sense of observing from behind a glass. You realize that the gestures you thought were spontaneous are patterned. The sentences you speak, the emotions you feel, the ambitions you chase, they are not entirely yours. They are inherited, rehearsed, borrowed. You begin to notice the scripts in real time, a smile that feels automatic, a thought that repeats itself without origin, a reaction that arrives before reason has time to respond. It is like discovering an echo in your own voice, or a shadow that moves ahead of your body. Some moments feel trivial, a habitual joke, a polite nod, but as awareness deepens, the pattern becomes undeniable. The self you thought was consistent, coherent, and singular begins to reveal itself as layered, performative, fragmented. The realization is neither dramatic nor catastrophic. It is simple, you are playing a role. And yet, there is relief in this recognition, not because the role is wrong, but because the truth has been revealed. Awareness dissolves the unconscious tension that arises from assuming ownership of something that was never assigned. You start to observe without judgment. You notice the scripts and see their patterns without needing to force them to change. There is a strange, gentle liberation in recognizing that you are not the lines you recite, the gestures you perform, or the persona you have assumed. Philosophers have long suggested that consciousness has this reflective power. Some neuroscientists call it metacognition, the ability to witness one's own mental processes. When you step into this observer stance, you are no longer trapped in automatic performance. You can see the role from outside, and paradoxically, in seeing it, you begin to inhabit it more lightly. The grip loosens because recognition replaces effort. This discovery does not erase the past. You still act in the world, you still navigate social and personal expectations. But the tension between the authentic self and the performed self begins to dissolve. You begin to sense a freedom that was always there, masked by habit and conformity. You are no longer compelled to believe that every reaction is an intrinsic truth. Some movements, some thoughts, some identities are optional. They are patterns you can witness rather than own. It is a quiet revelation, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. But for those who notice it, life begins to shift. The same actions, once burdensome with assumed responsibility, now carry a lightness. The voice that once insisted, "You must be this," softens. And in that softness, you begin to glimpse a profound possibility, that you are not defined by what you do, what you say, or what you have become, but by the simple, effortless act of noticing. In this space, the borrowed role is no longer a cage. It becomes a mask that you can lift, put down, or wear lightly without confusion. You start to understand that identity is not a fixed assignment handed down at birth. It is a spectrum of performances, choices, and reflections. And awareness is the key that allows you to step off autopilot and into a life where the lines you speak do not have to dictate who you believe you are. The discovery is not about rejecting the role. It is about seeing it clearly. And in that clarity, something profound occurs. The script remains, but its authority dissolves. You are free not because the performance ends, but because you realize you were never the author in the first place. You can breathe, move, and act without the heavy weight of ownership, because the illusion of assignment has finally been illuminated. Once the role is seen, its hold begins to soften. The rigidity that once defined your movements, your thoughts, your sense of obligation, starts to melt into something more fluid. You realize that effort, which once felt necessary to maintain the performance, is no longer required. The masks you wore, stitched tightly into your daily life, can now rest lightly on the shelf or be removed entirely. It is as if the world has been playing a quiet trick. The harder you tried to be yourself, the more constrained you felt. But the moment you notice the pattern, the tension releases. Neuroscience hints at this through studies of habit formation and self-reflection. When the prefrontal cortex observes automatic behavior, the habitual pathways relax. You are still moving, still speaking, still performing, but now with a grace that was previously impossible under the weight of unconscious ownership. Paradoxically, awareness does not demand action. You do not have to fix what is already functioning. You do not have to rewrite the script in order to step out of it. Simply seeing the role, noticing its contours, is enough to transform the experience. The performance itself continues, but it no longer dictates your inner life. The world may still assign its expectations, but you can meet them lightly, without confusing obligation with identity. In this space, small gestures become acts of freedom. A smile is offered without attachment. A word is spoken without urgency. A pause in conversation is no longer filled with anxious correction. You start to witness the intricate machinery of your behavior without gripping it as reality. And in that witnessing, the mind learns a new rhythm, one that moves from compulsion to choice, from tension to gentle observation. The loosening is subtle. It may appear as calm in moments that once triggered stress, or clarity in decisions that once felt muddled. You begin to recognize that the very effort to perform correctly was part of the role's power. Release that effort, and the role softens. The mask does not vanish, but its edges blur. And in that blur, a quiet possibility emerges. You can inhabit the world fully, yet lightly, because you are no longer bound to the identity you once assumed. Even as the role loosens, life continues. Responsibilities, relationships, and routines remain, but their weight shifts. No longer do you carry the illusion that every action proves your worth or defines your essence. The external world moves as it always has, yet your perception of it is transformed. You act, you speak, you respond, but without the silent compulsion that once dictated every gesture. This subtle shift has profound implications. You begin to notice that authenticity is not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized. The freedom lies not in creating a new self, but in seeing the old one with clarity. The narrative you once believed to be mandatory was never written in ink. It was sketched in sand, reshaped continuously by the currents of culture and expectation. And now, for the first time, you can watch those currents without being swept along. Your choices take on a new texture. Decisions are no longer measured by an invisible rubric of correctness, but by presence, curiosity, and intention. You notice the roles others play, the scripts that surround you, and yet you are no longer compelled to adopt them blindly. A growing awareness emerges. Life continues without needing your compliance in every act, and yet participation remains possible, joyful, and effortless. Some physicists and philosophers suggest that this perspective may echo deeper truths about consciousness itself. Awareness is not separate from experience, it illuminates it. By seeing the script for what it is, you are no longer trapped by the illusion of assignment. The world continues its dance, roles are still performed, yet you are free to step lightly, to move with curiosity, and to recognize that identity is fluid, optional, and ultimately, yours to observe rather than own. And so, in the quiet spaces between actions, you arrive at a truth both simple and profound. Nothing needs fixing, nothing is missing, and yet everything is as it is. The script you once assumed to define you has been illuminated, its edges softened, and in that softening, life breathes more freely. You realize that the self is not a rigid construct to be maintained, but a fluid presence to be witnessed. Imagine a doorway, open to light, inviting but not demanding. You step through, not to become someone new, but to recognize that you were never trapped in the role you thought was yours. Each gesture, each word, each breath is yours to observe, to release, to enjoy, without the weight of unseen obligation. The masks you wore are no longer chains. They are tools, instruments in a life that continues effortlessly when unclaimed. This awareness does not erase complexity. Relationships, responsibilities, and challenges still unfold. But now, they arrive into a mind unburdened by ownership of a performance that was never assigned. You can engage fully, move gracefully, and yet remain detached from the compulsion to prove, to measure, to perform. Life flows, and you flow within it, a quiet witness to the interplay of script and freedom. Some poets might call this liberation. Some neuroscientists might describe it as meta-awareness. Some philosophers might name it the subtle art of being. And perhaps, in the end, it is all three. You discover that the boundaries of self are thinner than you imagined, that effort can dissolve into observation, and that the ordinary, lived moment is enough. And in that enoughness, a paradox emerges. By stepping out of the assumed role, you inhabit the world more fully than ever. You breathe without forcing breath, move without compelling movement, think without being trapped by thought. The life that seemed heavy, prescribed, and unavoidable reveals itself as open, flexible, and radiant. You are here. You are witnessing. You are free. Not because the world has changed, nor because the role has vanished, but because you have finally noticed. It was never yours to carry, only yours to observe. And in that observation, the quiet miracle of being unfolds, steady, effortless, and endlessly alive.